So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jim Betticher, a good friend of ours, and he can introduce the first startup.
Great. Well, thank you, Nick, and good morning, everybody. I've been in venture capital for about 30 years, interested in environment all those years as well. And then about 6 years ago, I read a book by James Lovelock called Revenge of the Gaia. And the Gaia, in his parlance, is a living, breathing Mother Earth. And he said, man, there was a chapter that said, man will never mechanically capture enough CO2 to move the climate change needle. You have to leverage the Gaia, and that's leveraging photosynthesis. So he said, convert massive amounts of agriculture waste and forestry waste to biochar, put it in the soils that sequestered CO2. So I did a global search for pyrolysis technologies and must have looked at 50. Most of them were mom and pop operations, low margin operations. The biochar, what economics weren't very good. But I found a guy in Quebec City, Canada, who was different in two ways. First, he did a 60x scale up of his pilot plant in 2000. So it's proven at scale. And secondly, he captured the plant's natural immune system and resold it to make the whole business have a software company like gross margins. But for any great company, you need a great CEO. Luckily, I was also going to the board meetings for a company called Picaro, where Mike Woelk was the CEO. Another one of my portfolio companies did a cavity ring down gas spectrometer. And we had breakfast one day, and I told him about pyrolysis and this technology, and he got so excited. He said, I want to run the company. So he's a world-class CEO. He's a serial entrepreneur. Like I said, a great company needs a great CEO, and Mike is absolutely a great CEO. It's enough of me, Mike. Take it over, tell your story.
So Jim, thanks for that kind introduction, and everybody, it's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm going to talk a little bit about carbon and Corigin and our mission here of really trying to decarbonize the atmosphere. Everybody knows the Earth is heating up. There's an awful lot of energy and capital going into trying to remove carbon from the atmosphere. But we can't just think about climate change singularly. We have to think about global food, water, and climate security because they're all perfectly linked. Our strategy is basically to decarbonize the atmosphere and regenerate soils and generate significant free cash flows to grow this business. That's basically our playbook. But we go way beyond just removing carbon from the atmosphere. We also create very high margin products from crop residues that support farmers, and heal farmlands. Three most important things to take away from this is that we're running, we're selling, and we're looking to scale. So our playbook is basically take agricultural waste and turn them into multiple higher value products that again help the earth, farmers, and make money. We take about $10 worth of crop waste and we convert that into carbon negative derivatives. The biochar-based carbon credits will be sold to ESG buyers on the various exchanges. For every ton of biomass that we process, we remove about 1.2 tons of CO2 equivalent. So this is a significantly carbon negative business. The second thing is we produce high value products that are regenerative inputs that we sell back to farmers that overall help them increase their yields and decrease their costs. That spread is an increase in net profit per farmed acre. We think regenerative agriculture is a euphemism for making more money than farmers have ever made before while doing good things to help heal the planet. Three, and this is a small part of our revenue stack, is we produce bio oils that we're currently selling to third parties to actually pump underground and further sequester carbon. Net, that whole amount results in an 80% EBITDA margin business, which is astronomical gross margins. It's really accomplished two ways. We get $10 worth of feedstock. That's what it costs us to get a ton of agricultural waste almond shells. And we convert that into more than $1,700 of revenue at 76% product yield. The remaining 24% is a gas that we recovered to, again, heat the system and drive the process. So extraordinary gross margins and EBITDA margins on a very simple business model. So clearly, we're a carbon removal business that's unconstrained by carbon market economics. This stuff is all over the press these days. This company raises lots of money to remove carbon. This company's raised a lot of money to remove carbon. One of two things has to happen for those to remain viable businesses. Either the price of carbon removal credits must remain sky high, or the cost of productions need to crash by orders of magnitude. We're not constrained by any of that. So all of the other products, direct air cap or processes, direct air capture, limestone mineralization, bio-oil sequestration, bioenergy carbon capture and storage are all wonderful, but they all result in pumping the carbon deep underground where it provides no collinear value to the things that live above the ground, like us, plants, and animals. So we create skilled jobs. We're influencing biodiversity, water security, soil security. We're a circular economy business for sure, and we displace synthetic chemicals. But the most important thing is that we will produce very high profit margins compared to any of the other plays. So all of the carbon that's in our products, folks, was in the atmosphere just a few months ago, and most of it's never going back. Like I said, we remove about 1.2 tons of carbon dioxide for every ton of crop residue that we process. The model's pretty simple. Plants suck up CO2 every day through photosynthesis, but they give 99.2% of that carbon back to the atmosphere every single day, every single year. It's not very efficient. So we think of plants and trees as solar powered biochemical factories. And if we take that carbon from those residues and we convert them into products that don't decompose, that carbon now is removed from recycling back into the atmosphere. But our products do even more than that. They help regenerate soils. They reduce the fertilizer use and the associated nitrous oxide emissions. They reduce methane emissions and overall demand for fossil fuel derived synthetic chemicals. So how does this actually work? Turns out that fire ecology is a pretty simple way to do this. The coolest part of a match or any fire is right along the ground, right along the matchstick. That clear translucent area is about 475 degrees centigrade. Compounds are being liberated from that woody biomass into a vapor stream that as soon as it touches oxygen explodes into extraordinarily hot temperatures. That's combustion. Down along the matchstick is pyrolysis. We, of course, don't burn and don't want to burn agricultural waste, so we built a biorefinery on the right-hand side that basically leverages this fire chemistry but collects all of the chemical value that is being liberated from what we call lignocellulosic residues. And we distill those into liquids and into a char in a well-regulated environment. So we're up and running in Merced. We're processing now about 550 kilograms of almond shells an hour continuously. We're standardizing on a much larger system that will run between about 2 tons of biomass continuously per hour, but our technology is scalable to more than 10 tons of biomass continuous per hour. Frankly, if you can't do this stuff at great scale, you're helping gardeners, and gardeners, are really cool people, but they don't generally change the world. It has to scale to mechanized agriculture. So this platform is based on molten salt, similar technology that is used to heat nuclear reactors, as a matter of fact. Very sophisticated software, and our system is feedstock agnostic, which means it's perfect for any crop, forestry, or manure residue the world over. Let's talk a little bit more about farmers, our customers, because this is where I get really super excited. The farmer's number one job, their priority, and that's true for all of their agronomists and their pest control advisors, is to minimize crop stress. Crop stress is observed only after it's occurred. A farmer drives the field, he sees the fruit dropping off the trees, defoliation, color changes, leaf curl, whatever it may be. The damage has already been done. The yield hit has already occurred. It's too late, and it's a revenue killer when stress occurs on the crop. So what do? Our crop inputs are regenerative and they are organic certified, and they increase yields, like I said, and cut the overall expenses and increase net income per acre. The big hack to regenerative agriculture, folks, is in the agricultural waste streams that are never taken to market by farmers. That's loaded with biochemical and biocarbon value. To think about what happens with stress, just like when you're sick or I'm sick, we want to go to bed. We don't want to go out and exercise. We don't want to work. We don't do anything. We don't want to go to work, whatever. Plants do something very similar. They shift from primary metabolism, which is photosynthesis and growth, and marketable yield. That's where the farmer's profits come from. When they're under stress from pathogens, pests, nutrient imbalances, heat, water, you name it, they shift to secondary metabolism. And that energy is used to deconstruct the plant structures into immune chemicals called phenols, and yield declines, which means profit declines when crops are under stress. So if we take and see what that actually looks like, a tale of two trees, on the same orchard, on the right is a conventional ag program. These are navel oranges, and on the left is our program with just 1.5 gallons of this liquid product applied per crop. It's $60 to literally save these orchards by taking the immune system from last year's crops and applying it to all sorts of crops this year. And this is Corifol, and we're shipping it as an organic certified liquid product by the tanker load, by the tote loads, and in 2.5 gallon jugs to farmers. It goes in through the drip, it gets sprayed on the plants. Bugs hate it, pathogens hate it, plants love it. They grow a lot faster with lower fertilizer use every time we've tried it so far. The second thing, of course, is biochar. You probably have heard about biochar. This black substance right here. This is a carbon sequestration product that is put into soils. The whole key to having a viable biochar business is actually to make certain that the biochar economics are ancillary to the P&L. Biochar revenues in biochar in our revenue stack is a very small portion of the overall build, but it's essential to our climate mitigation and soil regeneration strategies. And we're shipping this by the truckloads as well now to farmers. The third product is a bio oil, which is a very small part of our overall revenue stack. And this is being sent now to some other companies who have raised money to take all of the liquid distillates that we produce, except they're having trouble producing them, and pumping them underground. That's a nice carbon negative derivative too, but it's only about 1% of our revenue stack. So we're clearly a biochemistry company, and we're also a company that has a nice runway of additional carbon negative products. We think carbon negative products, the ability to source carbon from the atmosphere as opposed to fossil fuels. In fact, that's the whole concept behind the name of Corigin, which is shifting the origin of carbon, can apply to all sorts of industries, from ready-to-use sprays and home gardening, biofungicides, cements and asphalts, or even high-value chemicals. The thing that we do is we basically use thermal deconstruction and biorefining technology to be able to access all of that information and the chemical value. So we're selling now to farmers that grow about 500,000 acres of high-value crops across the state of California. The basic value proposition is we're going to increase net income per farmed acre, and it's cheap and it's also regenerative. We'd like high margins going to our dealers to give us priority on their sales list. We've got a lot of PR stuff, and we're using some of our funds to, of course, go and get additional product registrations. We're raising 15 to 25 million on a Series A to do a 5x to potentially 12x scale up. We can talk about that later. We aim to build replicate plants like the first ones here in Merced around the world using project finance or maybe even carbon finance as a means to scale with non-dilutive capital. Our pro forma P&L is pretty great when you look at it. The margins are outstanding. Getting to us to 80% EBITDA margins in the next couple of years. We got a great team. Jim is a hell of a co-founder with me, along with John Garamendi Jr. Christian Roy's our CTO. We have on our board a lot of deep agricultural experience at industrial scale. Charlie Sweat was a former CEO of Earthbound Farms, as big as it gets farming, and was all organic. Colin is chairman of Highview Power, and had a lot of project finance experience, as does Don Kendall. So like I said, all the carbon was in our products. Was in the atmosphere just a few months ago. Most of it's never going back. That's our pitch. Let's grow together. Thank you.
Wow, thanks, Mike. Bringing regenerative agriculture to scale, really wonderful stuff. Yeah, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and maybe if I can just kick it off, Mike, with a question. And maybe we could talk a bit about sort of the global market for industrial regenerative agriculture tools like this. Is it Western Europe and North America, or is it a little more complicated than that?
Well, we think Western Europe and North America are the 2 biggest opportunities. I mean, we're in North America, so we want to focus on our backyard. You know, a lot of people think that regenerative agriculture, and I say this a bit pejoratively and on purpose, it sort of resonates like, you know, Petaluma pumpkin farming. But when you go and you talk to farmers that grow thousands of acres, like 40,000 acres of pistachios, and you explain to them what crop stress looks like and how it impacts their financials, and that crops are not actually defenseless, but we do a good job of making them defenseless by hammering them with chemicals and depleting the soils. Nick, that message resonates with farmers. No matter how old school they are, they get it. And so that's really exciting, because then farmers suddenly begin to realize, well, wait a minute here, these products that are produced already by my trees are as good as the other products that are produced by company X, and they're cheaper, and it's full circle, and it's safer. They dig it. And I think that will be the big shift that occurs when farmers realize, wow, regenerative ag is not a euphemism for taking massive risks. In fact, it's quite the opposite.
They're speaking their language. Great.
Right.
Do we have time for maybe 1 question from the audience before we got to move on? If there's anyone here that has a burning question, we'd love to hear from them.
No pun intended.
It wasn't, but I like it too. A good biochar joke, right? Good way to start the day.